Our main guy had a singular burning obsession, clawing his way to the absolute pinnacle of martial arts. But as the clock ticked, a brutal reality set in. Even grinding away every waking second of his life wouldn't cut it. The universe had basically decided he wasn't built to unlock that god-tier level of combat mastery. Driven by raw desperation, giving up simply wasn't in his DNA. Instead, he gambled everything on a forgotten myth. Whispers of an ancient celestial dragon hoarding a glowing golden fruit, an artifact rumored to grant pure immortality to anyone crazy enough to eat it. After a blood-soaked near-fatal showdown with the scaly guardian, he finally dragged himself into the sacred grove, where the mythical prize is actually bloomed. He was totally stunned. The legendary golden fruit wasn't cap, it was 100% real. Blinding golden rays spilled across the cavern, pulsing with an intense otherworldly energy. Completely drained from the brutal clash, he slumped down right on top of the slaughtered dragon's massive carcass. Staring daggers at the glowing prize, he gasped for air, forced his battered body upright, and staggered toward the branch. Absolute certainty surged through his veins. He just knew this was the ultimate cheat code. This was his golden ticket to finally shatter his limits and touch the combat pinnacle he had obsessed over forever. Zero hesitation. He ripped the golden orb from the stem and bit down hard. The second it slid down his throat, an alien explosive surge of power detonated inside him. His veins bulged, his blood literally felt like magma, and his entire frame convulsed, feeling like he was being completely reconstructed by some godly force. Plot twist, this legendary badass was actually Gilthas Eldragon, the absolute strongest mortal walking the earth. But fast forward a few decades, and Father Time finally caught up with him. Now he was just a frail old man trapped in a bed, suffocated by a crowd of tearful kids and grandkids. Murmurs echoed through the room. They all knew the Grim Reaper was knocking, and it was time to say their final goodbyes. Gilliam, his oldest boy, gripped his old man's fragile hand. The dying patriarch of the Eldragon clan looked right at his son and dropped some final wisdom. He flat out refused to see them crying over him. His ticket was just finally punched, simple as that. Gilliam choking back sobs, he admitted the estate had already felt like a graveyard since their mom crossed over, and losing their dad would just make the silence unbearable. But Gilthas shot him a gentle yet firm look, warning him to never let that soft, crushing grief swallow him alive. As heavy silence blanketed the bedroom, Gilthas's mind drifted back to that glowing ancient fruit. Deep down, he finally admitted that banking on some ancient fairy tale was probably a rookie mistake all along. But hey, he still counted his blessings. Surviving long enough to build an entire bloodline, that was a massive win. He looked at his weeping family and declared that he had lived an epic, totally fulfilling life, and that he had zero regrets. But honestly, that was pure cap. Even on his deathbed, that burning obsession was still eating him alive. If he could just borrow a little more time, he would be right back to grinding toward that martial arts summit, the ultimate prize that ghosted him his entire life. So as the lights faded, he clung to that raw ambition until his heart flatlined. But hold up, here comes the ultimate plot twist. Gilthas's eyes suddenly snapped wide open. He was totally disoriented, thinking he just took a wild nap, but the vibe was way off. The ceiling was completely different. His body felt ridiculously light, and the whole scenery was straight up alien. The second he glanced down at his own hands, his jaw practically hit the floor. Wait, these tiny hands. Am I a freaking infant? It hit him like a truck. He was in a seriously bizarre glitch. Being a legendary 10-star martial artist, he instantly went into analytical mode. Who the heck could have nerfed him without triggering his radar? Then boom, the memory flashed. The celestial beast, the puzzle pieces finally clicked. That mythical fruit wasn't about living forever. It was a straight-up respawn token. Even though it totally caught him off guard, pure, unadulterated hype flooded his tiny veins. He just copped an insane redo, a whole brand new life to finally conquer that impossible summit he missed the first time around. A split second later, a chilling realization hit him. He definitely wasn't flying solo. Scanning his surroundings, the brutal truth clicked. He was locked inside the infamous annex of the Eldragon Manor. By some insane glitch in the universe, he had respawned right back into his own bloodline. Glancing around, his eyes widened. The room was absolutely packed with other clueless newborns. While he was trying to process this bizarre baby convention, a squad of maids marched in clutching feeding bottles. But hold up. Instead of warm milk, those glasses were filled with a thick, ominous crimson syrup. Gilthas watched like a hawk as the servants casually prepped the glowing red sludge. He figured it was feeding time until one of the maids randomly dragged a screeching goblin into the center of the room. Without a second thought, They ruthlessly jammed the glass nozzle straight down the creature's throat. Seconds later, the monster went into full-blown convulsions. A blinding blood-red aura erupted from its skin. And boom! The beast literally detonated, painting the nurse. Gilphus completely froze, paralyzed by the sheer insanity. Panic and raw confusion hijacked his brain. Like, seriously, what kind of twisted nightmare is this? Without missing a beat, a maid deadpanned that the volatile concoction would be totally fine, as long as they diluted it with the... As the staff started shoving this toxic cocktail into the mouths of the crying babies, another cold-eyed servant violently scooped Gilphus right out of his He locked onto the dripping bottle. Yeah, that was 100% not baby formula. The raw aura radiating off the glass was suffocating. His warrior instincts immediately flagged the liquid as pure, unadulterated dragon blood, a lethal dose of raw magic that would absolutely obliterate a frail newborn's core. Before he could even dodge, the servant forcefully jammed the plastic nipple past his lip. Driven by pure newborn reflexes, he started swallowing. Bam! A colossal shockwave of energy ripped through his tiny veins. Agony racked his miniature frame, making him violently shudder, but Gilphus knew exactly what this feeling was. The primal essence of ancient dragons was currently hijacking his bloodstream. He panicked. This is practically suicide. But wait, this could also be the ultimate cheat code. At first but then it clicked. If his tiny vessel could somehow digest this catastrophic energy, he could literally eclipse his own past life stats. He might finally shatter the ceiling of martial arts. Gritting his non-existent teeth, he aggressively chugged the fiery elixir. His veins practically glowed through his skin. His body violently twisted in pure torment, yet his mind stayed absolutely bulletproof. "Do not sleep on me," he mentally roared. "I am Gilphus L. Dragon." Chanting his own name like a lifeline, he weathered the hellish torture until by some absolute miracle the pain finally broke. The maid stood there completely gagged. She watched in pure shock as the infant kept deep inside his tiny core. Two colossal dragon energies slammed into each other brutally, warring for absolute dominance. When one violently crushed the other, Gilphus was honestly mind-blown by how effortlessly his body absorbed the power buff. As the twin dragon forces perfectly synced inside him, he realized he had just struck the ultimate jackpot. Draining the very last drop, he was genuinely stunned that he had outlived that soul-crushing agony. His tiny frame hadn't exploded into confetti. Instead, it aggressively adapted. Catching sight of a handful of other babies who actually survived the trial, a smug little smirk crossed his mind. Bro, never sleep on the savage survival instincts of a newborn, he gloated internally. But let's be real, an infant's stamina is practically zero. A massive wave of exhaustion immediately crashed down, making his eyelids incredibly heavy. And just like that, despite scoring an insane victory, fast forward 7 years, and our boy was already grinding through a hellish physical training montage. Picture this, he's effortlessly repping out one-handed push-ups, all while balancing a massive boulder right on top of his feet. When he finally smashed through rep number 1000, he aggressively kicked the giant rock straight into the air, only to let it violently slam right back down onto his back. Gilphus stared at his hands, absolutely mind-blown by the raw power coursing through his veins. Once the legendary boss of the L Dragon clan, Gilphus L Dragon, was now rocking a completely new identity. Zeke L Dragon. How did a kid bag this kind of insane muscle so early, he realized. It all boiled down to the ancient dragon blood pumping straight through his system. Legend had it that every living soul carried a hidden battery, a source of power. But that ancient dragon blood shoved down their throats as babies. It packed a ridiculous amount of that juice. Any kid tough enough to survive downing it morphed into an absolute tank, leaving regular humans in the dust. Fueling up on that divine dragon energy, Zeke knew he'd already smashed right past the limits he had at this exact age in his past life. Plus being the sole newborn, crazy enough to chug an entire freaking bottle of the stuff. His anatomy completely mutated, shocking even him. But here was the kicker that drove him absolutely insane. He was still stuck at a measly 1 star. He'd been grinding non-stop, fully expecting to hit at least 4 stars by now. Stars were basically the ultimate flex measuring your core strength. In this reality, human anatomy mirrored an entire galaxy. The more stars you had lighting up that inner cosmos, the more of a menace you became. But the higher you climbed, the more impossible leveling up felt. Back in his prime era as Gilphus L Dragon, Zeke had shattered reality by locking in 10 stars. He was literally the only human in history to ever pull that off. His dad was the reigning boss of the El Dragon clan, but his mom passed away when he was practically still in the crib. And to top it off, he still hadn't caught a single glimpse of his so-called father. Talk about absolute deadbeat energy. But the ultimate mindbender, figuring out that 1,000 years had vanished since he got respawned into this life. Coming back from the dead was wild enough, but a millennium later, this universe was completely unrecognizable. It had warped into a brutal eat-or-be-eaten bloodbath. The biggest red flag? Shoving raw, ancient dragon blood down a helpless infant's throat and throwing them straight into a nightmare called the Dragon Trial. Only the absolute beasts who survived both the blood and the trial earned the right to get geared up and trained as elite El Dragon soldiers. By all logic, Zeke belonged right in that lineup, but every time he grilled his assigned caretaker about why 0 mentors had shown up to train him, the guy would just dodge, claiming those questions were strictly off limits. 7 years breathing, and Zeke hadn't scored a single combat lesson. Seriously, how sketchy is that, Zeke muttered. Every single survivor of that trial was meant to jump straight into the combat grinder. Everyone except him. Day in and day out, he rotted in isolation with just one dude watching his back. When he snapped and pushed for answers, the guy just blankly asked what the big deal was. Zeke let out a heavy sigh, deciding that bulking up his raw physique took priority over some basic sparring anyway. Besides, he could literally act as his own sensei if he really needed to. He was a legendary 10-star god in his past life after all. Shifting gears, Zeke demanded the files on the other surviving kids, or any intel on the main family he could use as leverage. But shocker, the maid totally stonewalled him again, throwing up the same old, above-my-pay-grade excuse. You could physically see the annoyance boiling over on Zeke's face. "Are you literally going to dodge my questions forever?" he snapped. But the maid didn't even flinch, parroting her strict gag order. "Don't you think it's kinda messed up to treat me like this?" he spat bitterly. But she just deflected, hiding behind her strict orders. Her only job was keeping him fed and breathing 0 extra perks. Flexing a solid 3-star cultivation rank, she was no joke. She could have effortlessly walked him through the basics of combat. Honestly though, Zeke couldn't care less about those low-level pointers. He had been stuck in this house with her for 7 long years. By now, he was totally numb to her robotic, emotionless energy. Having had enough, he just dipped, making a beeline straight for the dense woods. The maid stayed dead silent, just staring blankly as he faded into the tree line. "She's seriously just gonna let me wander off," he scoffed internally, completely annoyed by the... Plunging deep into the wild, Zeke started ripping out highly toxic plants and straight up swallowing them whole without blinking. The flavor was absolutely gut-wrenching, but swallowing poison was literally a core step in his insane grinding routine. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. He inhaled sharply, wrestling his heart rate back down to 0. "Chill out. Just wait it out," he chanted mentally. The heavy sensation of eyes burning into the back of his neck told him someone or something was tracking his every step. He couldn't shake that creepy, skin-crawling feeling no matter what he did. After a heavy beat of silence, he let out an exhausted sigh. "So they really shadowed me this far out, huh?" Hitting his breaking point, he finally yelled out, "If you've got beef, you might as well step out of the shadows." Instantly, he dove into the thick brush, melting into the tall. Crouched in the dirt seconds later, a suffocating pitch-black energy slammed into his radar. Peeking through the weeds, he locked eyes on the source, a massive, terrifying beast. "What on earth is leaking off of that thing?" he questioned, completely thrown off. That sinister black fog swirling around the monster. He hadn't seen anything like it, not even in his past life, 1,000 years ago. While the beast blindly chewed on weeds, Zeke sprang up, totally exposing his position. Spooked out of its mind, the massive boar instantly bolted straight for his chest. But instead of panicking, a wicked smirk sliced across Zeke's face. The dude was actually hyped for a deathmatch. As the monster lunged for the kill, Zeke flawlessly sidestepped, channeling raw, glowing gold energy directly into his knuckles. With one devastating punch, he triggered a shockwave that completely shredded through the boar's thick armor. He couldn't wipe the grin off his face. That blast packed way more heat than he originally calculated. For a measly 1-star rookie, his raw damage output was effortlessly dunking on anyone in his tier. Casually piecing the dead beast over his shoulder, he whispered, "Just imagine the stats once I actually level up." Honestly, he was just completely burned out from spending 7 years treated like a ghost by the Eldra. It was seriously starting to feel like the perfect time to pack his bags and go solo. Maybe he'd just head out and explore the coast. Cut to the background, where a sketchy cloaked figure was spying on. "What is actually the deal with this kid?" the stalker muttered in sheer disbelief. 0 professional coaching, yet he's already hit the 1-star milestone. And he literally just one-shot an anger boar But what really broke the spy's brain was how the kid even clocked him hiding in the first place. "That boy is built totally different," he whispered into the wind. He flashed back to the bitter reality. Zeke's mom had passed away tragically young, and his old man, the literal head of the clan, had completely ghosted him, left in the dark with zero guidance. There was no logical way the kid should have mutated into such an absolute, but at the end of the day, bastard child or not, he still carried the heavy title of the Eldragon Patriarch's son. Zeke was forever trapped under the family's suffocating radar. That was exactly why an elite shadow like him was deployed to tail the boy's every move. A hidden child, yet the undeniable terrifying blood of the clan leader practically boils in his veins. "Is that the sick secret behind his insane strength?" the shadow murmured into the void. Shaking off his doubts, he let out a low, chilling laugh. "This kid is going to be one hell of a movie to watch unfold." With that, he vanished like smoke into the pitch-black night. Cut back to Zeke's rundown shack. He was tossing his gear into a bag, totally hyped to kickstart his solo journey, when out of nowhere, his radar pinged. Massive auras were surrounding his turf, 3 4-star heavyweights backed up by a literal 5-star powerhouse. "What the heck is a hit squad doing at my doorstep?" he mentally cursed. Creeping silently toward the wooden door, he strained his ears only to catch them randomly hyping up how crisp and pure the mountain breeze felt. They were literally vibing over the tranquil scenery, totally relieved that there wasn't a single deadly monster rift in sight. Catching their totally chill vibe, Zeke instantly dropped his guard. These definitely weren't bloodthirsty hitmen. Honestly, they just sounded like a bunch of harmless tourists. Deciding to skip the sneaky games and face them head-on, he ripped the door open and fired off. "Who are you and what do you want?" The entire squad instantly froze, caught completely off guard. That's when Zeke's sharp eyes locked onto the intricate crest stitched right into their uniforms. The unmistakable fiery sigil of the Eldragon clan. Eldragon! He breathed out, a bitter taste lingering on his tongue. His mind raced desperately, trying to figure out why his toxic family. The elites instantly dropped into a deep, respectful bow. "It is an absolute honor to finally cross paths," young Master Zeke the captain announced with zero hesitation. "We've been officially dispatched to safely escort you to the proving grounds for your exam." Zeke's brows smashed together in sheer disbelief. Pure irritation flashed across his eyes. "They seriously dragged me out to take some test," he grumbled under his breath, "when they haven't lifted a single finger to teach me a damn thing my entire life." Fast forward a few days, and Zeke was still tripping over the fact that he was actually standing right back in the massive, opulent courtyard of the main Eldragon estate. They made it crystal clear he wasn't being welcomed back to live a lavish lifestyle, but drafted for an entirely different high-stakes mission. But before he could even cross the golden threshold, the guards ordered him to strip off his ragged, dirt-stained survival gear. Then they dropped a massive lore dump on a legendary institution straight up called the Dragon's Nest. Turns out, after an epic 1,000-year reign, the Eldragon dynasty built an elite academy designed to forge every single branch of their mighty bloodline. Any kid lucky enough to carry even a drop of Eldragon DNA practically drooled over the dream of infiltrating this prestigious Dragon's Nest, hoping to unlock top-tier combat education the second they hit 7 years old. And ironically, today was the exact date of Zeke was literally dragged back just to survive their brutal entrance exams. Despite being completely out of the loop on how the modern generation of his twisted family operated, skipping this insane trial was simply not an option. It was completely Zeke's vibe instantly crashed. Realizing this whole escort mission was just a trap to lock him into the clan's system felt like a massive gut punch. Why pull this stunt now? His mind screamed. Especially when he was literally seconds away from going rogue to explore the globe. As he slumped against the towering academy gates, a random kid hailing from Orlisquel village suddenly slid into his personal space. It was Rangus. The dude genuinely checked in on him, asking if he was good and what was killing his mood. When Zeke threw him a cautious, "Who the heck are you?" look, the kid gave a super formal intro, bowing slightly, as Rangus admitting he only stepped up because Zeke looked like he was battling some serious demons. "Oh, really?" Zeke brushed off, playing it cool. But as his eyes traced the subtle humming monocurrents flowing through Rangus's frame, Zeke silently noted that while the kid gave off major socially awkward vibes, his sensory perception was absolutely off the charts. Zeke quickly brushed off his awkwardness, tossing out an apology before finally introducing himself. He confessed his brain was completely short-circuiting right now because he was totally in the dark about what this crazy exam was actually going to throw at them. Wait, seriously? That's it. Rangus blurted out, a wave of anxiety hitting him, just hearing the word test. Even so, he broke it down, explaining that the legendary Dragon's Nest entrance exam stayed pretty much the exact same every single year. But when Zeke flat out admitted he was flying totally blind, Rangus's jaw practically hit the floor. Walking into this brutal trial with zero prep, wasn't that straight up suicidal and insanely reckless? Right as Rangus opened his mouth to spill the exam secrets, a super obnoxious voice crashed their conversation. Some cocky kid was barking insults, straight up calling Rangus trash. Rangus whipped around, his eyes locking onto a very familiar face. It was Retin, an arrogant tryhard from his own hometown, Mortis Scale Village. Dripping with sarcasm, Retin demanded to know what he was doing there, joking that the loser must have taken a wrong turn to end up at the Dragon's Nest. He sneered, telling him to scurry back home before he got himself killed. I'm here for the entrance exam." Rangus stuttered out, his voice shaking, as Retin stepped right into his personal space, mocking the idea of him actually competing. Retin literally doubled over, cackling like a maniac, declaring there was zero chance he'd ever pass. Then he crossed the line, dragging Rangus's dad into it. "Your old man's just a pathetic pseudo-dragon, right? What makes you think the son of a failure could ever amount to anything?" Rangus's knuckles turned white as he desperately choked back his boiling rage. But Zeke didn't miss a single detail. Here's the lore drop: the Eldragon family operates on a brutal, inescapable class system. The pecking order goes exactly like this: novice, whelps, soldier, child dragons, captain, tier, adult dragons, and the big bosses, the executive elder dragons. But sitting at the absolute rock bottom of the food chain, the pseudo-dragons. Anyone who choked during the Dragon's Nest trials or failed to graduate got branded as pathetic, half-baked failures for life. But Rangus was fueled by one massive dream: to prove to the entire world that even if they were slapped with the pseudo-label, they still had real, undeniable dragon blood pumping through their veins. Unfazed, Zeke tilted his head and casually asked why Retin was acting so ridiculously cocky before the exam even kicked off. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Retin barked, getting up in Zeke's face and asking if they had beef. Zeke didn't even flinch, calmly replying that he was just trying to figure out where all this unearned confidence was coming from. Retin jammed a finger at Rangus and screamed that the answer was glaringly obvious. "He's complete trash." Zeke just gave him a deadpan look, questioning if he seriously thought Rangus was the weak one here. Because from his radar, Rangus actually felt way more overpowered than Retin's entire squad. Hearing that flex, Rangus stared at Zeke, totally shell-shocked. Nobody had ever defended him like that before. The snobby kids were instantly triggered, furious that this random guy was ranking them below a pseudo-dragon, a creature they viewed as utter garbage. But right before punches could be thrown, an imposing figure stepped onto the scene. It was the head examiner, an elite adult dragon, booming out that the legendary Dragon's Nest trials were officially kicking off, and ordering all the rookies to line up and snag their contestant numbers. Backing off, Retin shot Zeke a lethal glare, growling that he'd be putting him on his hit list. Zeke just let out a heavy sigh, muttering that there was zero reason to be so salty, acting like a total boomer by saying kids these days had zero chill. Rangus quickly gave him a reality check, pointing out that they were literally the exact same age. Plus, he added literally anyone would lose their minds if they were told they were weaker than the class loser. "Oh, is that how it works?" Zeke mumbled, completely unbothered. Either way, skipping the entrances exam wasn't an option. They had no choice but to dive straight into the chaos. Zeke was low-key stunned when Rangus dropped the bomb that ditching this whole test was actually an option. As Zeke's eyes bugged out, Rangus caught on that his guy was completely clueless. He desperately warned him to just dip right, then and there, before he got seriously wrecked. But Zeke just smirked, flexing that a prodigy like him would never back down from a fight. Rangus just face-palmed, groaning that Zeke was way too full of himself for someone walking in totally blind. Zeke just chuckled it off, saying whatever this trial threw at them, they needed to hustle because things were already kicking off. Rangus had zero choice but to tag along. The second they rolled up to the arena, the proctor dropped the rules, claiming the trial was a total breeze. All they had to do was leave a single scratch on the massive boulders chilling right behind him. There was a massive catch, though. Absolutely no outside gear was allowed, only the standard issue blades handed out by the Academy. But hey, if anyone felt like throwing hands, going bare knuckle was totally fair game. Each rookie only got 3 shots, though. "That is it," Zeke scoffed, completely underwhelmed. After surviving that brutal dragon trial when they were literal toddlers, he fully expected some next-level terrifying bloodbath. But this was just ridiculously boring. The proctor finally barked out the first name, signaling the start. A shaking but hyped-up kid stepped up and slammed his blade into the boulder with everything he had. A deafening screech of metal slamming on solid rock blasted through the courtyard. But jaws dropped instantly, the kid's sword exploded into pieces, and the brutal kickback instantly pulverized his entire arm. Zeke was genuinely taken aback as the poor guy thrashed around on the ground, screaming in absolute agony. Stone-faced, the proctor casually reminded the bleeding kid he still had 2 tries left, asking if he wanted another go. But since the dude could not even stand up, the proctor immediately stamped him with a fail, barking at the crew to drag him away and mop up. As the mangled rookie was hauled off, the next victim was called up. Rangis was physically shaking, terrified by the absolute carnage, while Zeke just got totally annoyed. So this is what passes for an exam, he grumbled under his breath. Turns out these were no ordinary rocks, they possessed an insane healing factor. Any dent or scratch would literally vanish in a split second. On top of that, if you hit them with brute strength, they blasted that exact force back. Zeke instantly called foul, saying bringing that kind of overpowered material to a rookie exam was just insane overkill. But Rangis chimed in, whispering that leaving a mark was actually doable. If you could perfectly channel your inner source power through your entire system right before impact. Ah, makes sense. Zeke nodded. He instantly clocked that mastering that energy flow was the real test here, not just raw physical combat. After giving the crowd of nervous rookies a quick scan, he figured maybe a tiny handful of them were actually built for this, including those cocky rich kids standing nearby. As the trial dragged on, the fail rate absolutely skyrocketed. Bodies were dropping left and right, totally wrecked by the boulder's brutal counterattack. And then, finally, the proctor barked out Zeke's number. Guess it is showtime. Zeke smirked, completely unbothered. Rangis, sweating bullets, begged him one last time to just walk away. But Zeke brushed him off and strolled straight to the front, telling him to chill. As he stepped up, the proctor's eyes suddenly blew wide open. A terrifying, ghostly aura started radiating off Zeke, leaking the raw, god-tier energy of his past life as Gilphus. The stunned proctor told him to pick his weapon, but Zeke waved him off. No need, he declared. His bare hands were more than enough. The entire crowd instantly lost their minds, gasping in shock. People were whispering that no matter how insane his energy control was, throwing pure fists at that cursed rock was a straight-up death wish. He was totally going to turn his knuckles into dust. Some kids even bet his entire arms would explode on impact, sending Rangis into an absolute trembling panic for his best friend. Frustration boiled in his gut, kicking himself for not anything to keep him from getting totally wrecked. Right on cue, the proctor dropped his hand, signaling the start. Zeke casually strolled up to the colossal boulder, pressing his bare palm against its cold. He traced the bizarre texture. In all his past life, he had never crossed. His mind quickly did the math. This thing had to be ancient, forged deep in the earth, well over 1,000 years ago. Honestly, this whole modern era still threw him for a loop. There was so much about this generation he was totally clueless about. But whatever, none of that mattered right now. He instantly channeled a massive surge of aura straight into his clenched fist. Off on the sidelines, Rangis was practically sweating. Bullets terrified his buddy was about to snap every bone in his arm. But our boy Zeke, he was absolutely hyped. For the first time ever, he could finally drop the dead weight and go all out. This weird artifact was the perfect punching bag to gauge his current power levels. Rangis practically dropped his jaw as Zeke locked into the stance for the first form of the Dragon Destruction Arts Burst Strike. He drove his glowing fist squarely. Boom! A blinding shockwave of pure raw energy detonated from the point of impact. The indestructible boulder instantly vaporized into shrapnel. A hurricane of dust and jagged debris ripped through the entire arena. Absolutely shell-shocked, Rangis threw his arms up to block the violently flying rubble. The proctor's eyes practically bulged out of his skull. When the heavy smoke finally cleared, Zeke was just chilling there. He casually muttered that the ultimate move was still way too heavy a burden for his current stats. Even with his knuckles totally mangled and bleeding profusely, he just let out a quiet, crazy chuckle. Guess it was time to grind way harder and lock in for some seriously brutal training. The entire crowd of examinees went dead silent. They were literally too stunned to speak. Retton glared from the sidelines, looking completely shook, but insanely salty. A mysterious girl in the stands smirked, whispering that this kid was definitely built different. The rest of the mob was still glitching out, unable to comprehend the absolute flex they just witnessed. Completely unbothered, Zeke stood tall, waiting for the stunned official to officially announce his... But the proctor was totally paralyzed. just frozen dead in his tracks. That enchanted rock literally had auto-recovery, the only warriors capable of even putting a dent in it were top-tier beasts who had already hit the 4-star rank or above. Yet right here, some random teenager just completely obliterated it, like it was absolutely nothing. But he is just an illegitimate son. The proctor mumbled under his breath, his mind spiraling. Did the overwhelming monstrous power of the patriarch actually run that deep in his veins? A sudden chill ran down his spine. That brutal martial art the kid just used felt weirdly familiar. Since the guy was still completely zoned out, Zeke clicked his tongue and snapped at him, impatiently demanding his score. Jolted back to reality, the flustered examiner cleared his throat and officially announced that Zeke had cleared the trial. Right after another staff member tossed Zeke a tiny glass vial filled with glowing green liquid. Raising an eyebrow, Zeke asked what the hell it was, but the dude just... Apparently he was holding up the line. Rolling his eyes, Zeke scowled quietly, grumbling about how modern folks had zero manners. Before he could pop off, Rangus sprinted over, absolutely hyping him up for that god-tier performance. Zeke flashed a cocky grin, brushing it off by claiming it was light work. He then held up the glowing vial again, asking his buddy what the weird juice was. Rangus quickly clarified it was just a standard healing potion. The go-to medicine for the El Dragon clan. A healing potion? Zeke echoed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Rangus nodded enthusiastically, but knowing his brutal status as the family bastard, Zeke seriously doubted it. In his mind, this glowing sludge was definitely straight-up poison. Still, with Rangus hyping it up, Zeke could not help but wonder, was this actually legit spiritual medicine? This legendary brew known as Cloud-Piercing Clarity was crafted from ridiculously rare loot, forged with mythical herbs ripped right out of hidden realms, spiked with the raw, unfiltered energy, and infused with the ultra-rare essence of elusive phantom beasts. One sip did not just patch up fresh battle damage, it completely wiped away ancient scars and deep-rooted trauma. Plus, it permanently buffed your core energy, but because the recipe was a total nightmare to pull off. So, finding one was basically impossible. Chugging it down, Zeke was absolutely mind-blown as a rush of instant healing surged through his veins. Is this seriously spirit medicine, he asked? Rangus just blinked, admitting he had literally zero clue what that term meant. But he swore on his life that the Eldritch family's private stash absolutely wiped the floor with any garbage sold on the streets. Rangus nervously asked if the potion was really that cracked. Obviously Zeke shot back, explaining how it instantly nuked his heavy battle wounds and completely wiped out his muscle fatigue. Even so, he could not help but notice it lacked that massive power level boost true spirit medicine gave. Meanwhile, Rangus stared at him in awe, whispering that Zeke was the actual freak of nature here. Zeke just laughed it off. Bro, quit messing around. Internally, though, Zeke was shook. The fact this potion even existed proved how insanely overpowered modern alchemy had become over the last millennium. As Rangus kept hyping up his insane strength, Zeke smirked, declaring his ultimate endgame to become the absolute strongest being alive. Suddenly, the proctor's voice echoed out Retin, and his obnoxious squad had just cleared the trial. Zeke saw that coming from a mile away. But the moment Rangus's number dropped, the poor guy started violently shaking. Swallowing his massive panic, he forced his legs to move, stepping up to the execution block. Watching him walk like a literal zombie, Zeke frowned. Why the hell was he sweating bullets? Hey, believe in your own hype, Zeke roared across. Rangus flushed beet red, frantically shushing him. But when Rangus walked over and gripped a standard sword, Zeke narrowed his eyes. What on earth is this kid playing at? The starting bell rang. Rangus lunged at the monolithic testing stone. And exactly as Zeke predicted, it was a massive flop. First strike, rejected. Gritting his teeth, he swung again with everything he had. Clang! The blade violently recoiled off the rock. Tom, sending him crashing to the dirt. His hands spasmed, completely shattered by the stone's brutal shockwave. Retin and his cronies instantly erupted into toxic laughter, howling that he was a predictable loser. A fake dragon's brat is just another pathetic fake, they jeered. They ruthlessly flamed him, screaming at him to just forfeit and go home. Retin then turned his smug face to Zeke. Is this the absolute joke you said would pass? You really think this trash is stronger than us? Zeke just stared back deadpan. Shut your mouth and watch, he snapped coldly. The proctor coldly reminded Rangus he was down to his final strike. Do you yield? He demanded. Rangus was completely paralyzed. Crushed by the sheer humiliation and the deafening hate from the crowd, he stared at the floor. But suddenly Zeke stomped right up to him. What exactly is your endgame here? Zeke demanded. Why the hell are you swinging a sword when you are meant to hold a spear? Why handicap yourself with a mismatched weapon? Did you seriously walk into this trial completely blind? Retton sneered from the sidelines as Zeke brutally, you could swing that blade 1,000,000 times and you would not leave a single scratch on that rock. Retton's crew howled again. What a moron, they shrieked. That kid does not know the first thing about spear combat. His loser dad only ever drilled him in swordplay. Switching his loadout now will not save him from reality. Tuning out the haters, Zeke locked eyes with the proctor. Is there a rule against swapping weapons mid-test? The proctor shook his head. No violation. A wicked grin spread across Zeke's face. Well then, looks like today is your lucky day, Rangus. Zeke locked eyes with Rangus, throwing down the ultimate question. Did he actually trust him? A brutal supercut of every single insult ever hurled at him and his dad looped painfully through Rangus's mind. Clenching his jaw, he squared his shoulders and went all in. He would ditch the blade and wield the spear exactly like Zeke ordered. Rangus spilled the bitter truth. His old man never actually managed to cross the threshold of the dragon's nest. Because of that massive failure, the whole town slapped him with the fake dragon label, treating him like an absolute joke. But swallowing every drop of that toxic mockery, his dad tanked the abuse just to give Rangus a fighting chance. That was exactly why the dude made a blood oath to shut down the haters. He was going to prove that his dad's blood, sweat, and tears forged a legit, undeniable dragon. Pushing himself up, knuckles turning white around the polearm, he roared out his vow. Today he was clearing their family name once and for all. Reality had hit him hard. Swinging that basic blade again was only going to hand him another massive L. So this time around, he shoved his doubts aside and put 100% of his faith in Zeke. There was just one glaring issue. He literally had zero clue. Zeke barked out his name, jabbing a firm finger right at the glowing enchanted boulder. He commanded the anxious kid to drop all the overthinking. Just launch that weapon dead center into the rock. Do not flinch, do not calculate, just shatter the thing completely. Zeke ordered without missing a beat, hearing that Rangus strangled the shaft of his weapon. He knew exactly how suicidal this move normally was. Poking that magic rock head on would not even leave a scratch, let alone dent its insane healing factor. Yet, Zeke was the very first guy in his entire life to actually have his back. They had literally just crossed paths today, making this raw loyalty feel totally wild and alien to him. But that crazy spark of friendship was all it took. He gambled everything on Zeke's word and ignited his own hidden potential. Channeling every ounce of his aura into the polearm, an insane realization washed over him. He had spent agonizing years grinding with a sword, but never once could he pump this much raw mana into a blade. And right now, the energy was flowing into the spear effortlessly like absolute magic. Screaming out a fierce battle cry, Rangus unleashed full beast mode and slammed the weapon into the boulder with terrifying force. Retton was practically wheezing from laughing so hard, hyping up his own, gloating that swapping gear would not magically rig the exam. But Rangus kept pushing. An explosive surge of power thrummed through his veins. The cold metal of the spear suddenly felt like a literal extension of his own arm. Then putting his entire soul into one explosive thrust, the blade blasted straight through the indestructible magic rock. The absolute horror, melting Retton's smug face, was pure gold. Even the deadpan proctors lost their minds, completely hyped over the insane flex they had just witnessed. The kid did not just leave a tiny scratch on the surface. He absolutely gutted the thing, blowing a gaping hole right through. Zeke instantly hyped him up, leaving Rangus staring blankly at his own hands, totally shook by his own massive W. Even after the examiner yelled out a crystal-clear passing grade, the guy was still stuttering desperately, asking if this was not just some crazy fever dream. Flashing a huge grin, Zeke threw an arm around his bro, locking in the victory. Drowning in euphoria, tears threatened to spill, as Rangus tackled Zeke into a massive hug, screaming at the top of his lungs that he finally made the cut. Meanwhile, the bully squad was deep in denial, screaming that it was a total fluke. But Retton, he just stood there, dead quiet. Trembling with pure, unadulterated rage, he could not swallow the bitter pill that Zeke's prediction was dead on. This so-called failure was actually leagues above them, and he absolutely styled on all their scores combined. Right then, the examiner's voice boomed, calling a wrap on the brutal exam. He dropped the memo that the official initiation ceremony was kicking off any minute. Zeke instantly questioned if they were actually off the hook. Rangus nodded, warning him that things would definitely ramp up the second they breached the legendary dragon's nest. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from the shadows as a menacing squad stepped right into the blinding spotlight. The proctor's voice boomed across the room, declaring that the patriarch of the Eldragon bloodline was about to step up and address the victorious recruits. The second Zeke laid eyes on the imposing figure, he leaned in asking who the guy with the dead-eyed pitch-black glare could possibly be. Ranges, practically sweating bullets, frantically whispered that they— "Wait, that's the patriarch?" Zeke scoffed. "What's with the funeral vibe? Not a single smile. Dude looks straight up frozen." Panicking, Rangus slapped a hand over Zeke's mouth, begging him under his breath to just shut up before he got them killed. Zeke gave a stiff nod. Sweeping his gaze over the elite squad flanking the patriarch, he realized he was looking right at the modern-day titans of the Eldragon Empire. The sheer firepower was insane. He could spot 7-star powerhouses mixed in with savage 6-star warriors. Even Zeke had to admit their combined raw aura was And the craziest part, the current patriarch, Balza Eldragon, was radiating an unbelievable 8-star energy level. Flashback 1,000 years, and you could literally count the number of legends hitting that tier on one hand. He had zero clue how common that kind of insane power was nowadays. "Yeah, I'm already getting bad vibes from this guy," Zeke mumbled, but before he could spit out another word, Rangus was desperately shushing him again. Zeke just let out a heavy sigh, his mind racing. Out of all the people in the world, he never imagined this terrifying tyrant would end up being his biological father in this reincarnated life. Suddenly, a suffocating blood-red aura exploded from Balza, crushing the gravity in the room. The proctor instantly barked at the crowd to zip it, announcing that Lord Balza was taking the floor. Stepping up to the podium, the patriarch didn't waste a single breath. "Bleed for this crest. Forge yourselves into the true fangs of the Eldragon lineage," he commanded. And with those chilling words, an apocalyptic shockwave of pure dominance washed over the massive hall. Zeke just stood there, totally unfazed. But the rest of the rookies were violently shaking. Kids were literally gasping for air, paralyzed like prey caught in headlights under that crushing pressure. Glancing over, Zeke saw even Rangus buckling under the sheer terror. It blew his mind how fast this entire room of elite prospects crumbled just from the patriarch's raw flex. But worse than the pressure was the suffocating wave of pure toxic malice bleeding out of Balza's energy. Zeke had no idea what fueled that dark rage, but it completely cemented his disgust for the man who was technically his dad. The moment Balza finally turned his back, a totally different guy swaggered up to the mic, instantly. Rocking bright blonde hair, he flashed a massive grin and hyped up Balza's grim speech. He breezily announced that the patriarch expected absolute greatness from every single one of them, but promised to keep his own monologue completely merciful and brief. While Zeke mentally questioned who this upbeat dude was, the guy literally just told the crowd to grind hard and level up. "Wait, that's seriously it?" one of the bewildered proctors whispered. The blonde guy just smirked, dropping a joke about how stressing over speeches causes early hair loss, so he was skipping the boring stuff entirely. Zeke honestly couldn't figure out the absolute mental whiplash of this clan, but hey, at least the room's suffocating tension finally evaporated. Catching the cue, the proctor hopped back on the mic to officially kick off the dorm assignments for the freshmen. The rule was simple. Once your tag was called, you grab your gear and move out instantly. Zeke turned and asked if the whole class was getting clumped together, but Rangus quickly broke down the layout. There were 4 massive factions, the East, West, South, and North sectors. Any rookie who actually survived the trials was randomly sorted into one of these 4 elite strongholds. Hearing his digits blast over the speakers, Zeke popped up, tossing a quick goodbye wave to Rangus. Looks like he was shipping out to the East Hall. Strolling down the massive corridors, he couldn't help but marvel at how ridiculously the architecture had evolved over the last millennium. After finally tracking down his door, he chuckled, admitting he definitely took a massive wrong turn somewhere, meaning his new bunkmate was probably already chilling inside. Kicking the door open, he flashed a grin, throwing out a loud, friendly greeting, and tossed a quick apology for taking forever to navigate the halls. They were officially going to be splitting this turf. But the second his eyes adjusted, his jaw dropped. Standing right there unpacking his bags was freaking Rangus. Zeke burst out laughing, totally mind-blown that the universe literally refused to separate them. He tossed his bags down and asked if they had any more crazy events on today's roster, and Rangus confirmed the brutal grind wouldn't officially— "Oh, seriously?" Zeke casually shot back, totally unfazed, which instantly made Rangus question if he'd even paid attention at all. "Did you actually catch a single word of the examiner's rundown?" "Nah, tuned it out completely," Zeke confessed without a shred of guilt. Rangus let out a heavy sigh, suggesting they just crash early, since tomorrow's training was going to be an absolute nightmare. Staring out into the quiet night, Zeke chewed over his ultimate escape plan, ditching the suffocating Eldragon estate to roam the globe. but then again spotting that crazy regenerative magic stone and those overpowered healing potions had sparked something inside him. This entrance exam had honestly served up some top-tier mysteries. If he seriously wanted to unpack the insane shifts this world had gone through over the last 1,000 years, then maybe crashing with the El Dragon clan for a bit wasn't a totally trash idea after all. Fast forward 1 month, and the Academy's boot camp was hitting entirely new levels of hell. Gripping massive iron dumbbells, the drill instructor barked that this Dragon's Breath routine was basically the holy grail of their combat arsenal. Forged by the legendary 15th family head, mastering this move was absolute life or death. Scanning the sweating recruits, the instructor zeroed in on a couple of standouts. A handful of prodigies were already nailing the rhythm flawlessly. Leading the pack was the fierce young noble they called Master Leica. Aura practically radiated off her, screaming that she was on the verge of hitting the 2-star rank. But shifting his gaze, the instructor's jaw practically hit the dirt at another impossible sight. Zeke wasn't just curling those massive dumbbells. He was casually balancing colossal boulders on his head and shoulders like it was nothing. Blinking away his absolute shock, the instructor whispered that the Supreme Patriarch's blood was definitely surging through this kid's veins. The wild part. Rumor had it, Zeke had been completely abandoned, left entirely untrained since childhood. So watching him pull off this insane stunt felt completely surreal. Meanwhile, Zeke was internally losing his mind over the fact that his ancient Dragon King's breathing art, it had actually been tweaked by future generations and handed out to the side branches like candy. In Zeke's playbook, breathing arts were all about siphoning raw environmental mana straight into your core. Pumping that energy through your veins would skyrocket your internal power grid. But your actual power output, that heavily relied on raw talent and pure brain power, which perfectly explained why the elite bloodlines locked their signature moves behind massive vaults, guarding them fiercely from random outsiders or anyone missing that sacred family DNA. Breaking it down, Zeke realized this modern Dragon's Breath was insanely safe and super basic. A total breeze to learn, sure, but completely garbage to him since it only worked while standing dead still. His original overpowered version let him snatch up surrounding mana while sprinting full speed through a battlefield. That meant his style was 1,000,000 times deadlier in actual brawls, but practically impossible for a normal person to master. Barely anyone in history ever pulled it off. He guessed these modern descendants must have nerfed his original blueprint, just so the weaker branch members could actually stand a chance at learning it. Honestly, that massive brainplay had definitely a weirdly proud smirk tugged at the corners of Zeke's mouth. He never pictured that his ancient hacks would still be carrying the clan 1,000 years later. It totally made him hyped to see if his other god-tier combat styles had leveled up too. Now this is getting spicy, he whispered to himself, visibly entertained by the whole situation. Meanwhile, Lika's sharp eyes were quietly tracking Zeke's every move from the shadows. Later in the mess hall, the entire squad was low-key traumatized by the absolute mountain of food Zeke was inhaling. While mercilessly destroying his 5th plate, he caught Rangus staring blank. "Bro, what's good?" Zeke mumbled, his mouth full. "You're never gonna bulk up if you don't actually eat." Rangus just gave him a deadpan look, asking how Zeke wasn't completely freaked out by his own bottomless stamina. "That's exactly my point," Zeke shot back smoothly. "Just shovel down more food if you want to. You've got to grind harder, push past your absolute limits." Zeke even tossed a chunk of his meal toward Rangus, but the big guy politely waved it off, saying he was already stuffed to the brim. While chewing, Zeke mentally sized up the competition, realizing half these elite kids had stepped foot in the academy, already jacked with. Suddenly a shadow fell over their table. "You've got some serious skills," Lika stated, her voice dripping with cool, unshakable confidence. Zeke barely blinked. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" he deadpanned. Rangus instantly choked on his food, his eyes bulging as he hissed a panicked whisper. "Are you insane? That's Master Lika, Lord Balza's daughter, the literal heir to the family head?" Zeke just shrugged. "Oh, what do you want me to do about it? I have no clue who she is." Rangus started sweating bullets. "Dude, shut up. You can't mouth off to her. She's literally in the running to take over the entire clan. You can't just talk to her like she's some random scrub." Zeke smirked. "Is that a fact? Funny. I'm a family head's kid too. Just the illegitimate version." Rangus completely blue screen, frozen in pure horror, while Lika's cold gaze shifted into burning curiosity. "Are you being serious right now?" she pressed. "You're actually the head's illegitimate blood. Let's hit pause for a second and set the stage. Meet Lika Typhona Eldradon, a top-tier prodigy gunning for the absolute throne of the Eldradon clan. who was now standing face to face with Zeke. Why would I fake being an outcast? Zeke scoffed, shrugging it off. Laika's brow twitched. Then explain something. How does a complete reject like you absolutely shatter a magic stone with nothing but your bare hands? How does a nobody wield that kind of insane, monstrous power? Zeke leaned back, radiating sheer confidence. Because I am Zeke. He flicked his gaze back to his buddy. Close your mouth, Rangus, and finish your food. The sheer audacity left both of them stunned silent for a second. Then a slow, predatory smile crept across Lika's face. You're actually wild, she purred, sliding right into the seat next to him. How about you work under my banner? I'll make you one of my top enforcers. Zeke cocked a single eyebrow. What exactly is that supposed to mean? She leaned in. Team up with me. Be my weapon, and I'll be your ultimate backer. Every underdog needs solid allies and real clout, right? Lend me your fists, help me conquer the family throne. And once I rule, I'll hand you your wildest dreams on a silver platter. Zeke didn't skip a single beat. Hard pass, he rejected flatly. Her smile shattered. Excuse me, why don't even try to tell me you're aiming for the throne yourself? Viscous, crackling mana started bleeding from her body, sparking the air with thick tension. Zeke's sharp eyes caught it. She was riding the very edge of the 2-star tier. Flexing that kind of raw pressure at her age, she was an absolute monster in her own right. Yet Zeke didn't even flinch. Knock yourself out with your little power trips, he stated, but I couldn't care less about playing family politics or chasing useless titles. Then why? Laika snapped, her voice dropping to freezing temperatures. Zeke violently slammed his knife straight into the wooden table. Because I don't bow to anyone, he warned, his tone slicing through the air like a razor. I'm already the absolute strongest person alive. The entire dining hall went dead silent. Even the iron-willed Lika couldn't wrap her head around the sheer terror gripping her heart. For one terrifying split second, Zeke's overwhelming aura completely swallowed her alive. Rangus wildly threw his hands up, jumping in to defuse the explosive situation, practically begging everyone to just chill out. But Lika was absolutely not the type to back down. Humiliated and vibrating with pure rage, she threw down the gauntlet, demanding a full-on, no-holds-barred duel right then and there. Zeke, however, literally couldn't care less, and went straight back to chewing his steak like she didn't even exist. Barely 5 minutes later, a massive commotion was already blowing up across the entire campus. Yo, where is the mob headed? One student shouted. The combat arena, bro, another yelled back. We got a crazy duel. Going down between the freshman Master Lika is personally stepping into the ring. Wait, what? The Master Lika from the Typhona clan, someone shrieked. Who's crazy enough to trigger her wrath? As the massive crowd flooded the bleachers, everyone was whispering frantically, dying to know which lunatic was about to face her. Meanwhile, Zeke was just annoyed, utterly baffled, that this rich girl was actually taking this so serious about a stupid duel. Bro, are you out of your mind? Rangus whimpered, practically sweating out his body weight. You're actually about to throw hands with Master Lika? I don't care if she's your boss. I still have zero clue who she is. Zeke shot back, completely unbothered. Rangus let out a massive sigh. Dude, show a little respect, especially since I just found out you're the boss's kid too. Whatever floats your boat, Zeke shrugged, but Rangus wasn't letting it go that easily. Listen to me. You need to realize exactly who you're messing with right now. Master Laika is no joke. She's the literal daughter of Lord Balza El Dragon. On top of that, she's got Typhina blood running through her veins. They're literally one of the top 4 powerhouse clans backing the El Dragons. She's an absolute prodigy. She mastered the Typhina's legendary lightning greatsword style while she was still just a kid. Just like the rest of her siblings, her raw talent is downright terrifying. Zeke just tilted his head. Yeah, I tuned out halfway through. All I caught was that she's the boss's daughter. Rangus stared at him like he was crazy. How do you not know any of this? Because I just don't, Zeke deadpanned. Stop asking. Rangus blinked in disbelief as Zeke suddenly burst out laughing. But hey, since I know absolutely nothing, this fight is going to be an absolute blast. Rangus facepalmed, completely stressed out. Sure, Zeke was ridiculously strong, but Master Laika was in a completely different league. Why on earth did you even accept her challenge? He groaned. Because I never back down from a brawl, Zeke shot back. Besides, it looks like my opponent is already itching to go. Right on cue, Laika stood there, her massive sword jammed straight into the earth. Her energy-spiked blue lightning literally sparking off her body. Are you two done chatting? She snapped, her voice ice cold. Laika screamed, demanding to know if they were finally done yapping, and Zeke casually fired back that he was ready to roll. Shaking out of his mind, Rangus instantly sprinted for the hills, hollering at Zeke to watch his back. Zeke turned his attention back to Laika, straight up asking why she was so obsessed with throwing down. Laika laid it all out. She was aiming straight for the throne to become the next head of the Eldragon clan, and to pull that off, she needed to crush Zeke right here and force him to join her squad. What exactly does that mean? Zeke raised an eyebrow, completely lost on how he fit into her grand master plan of taking over the family. Laika scoffed, asking if he was seriously this clueless about their family's current political mess, and wondering if being an illegitimate kid was the reason he was living under a rock. Zeke just shrugged it off. He flat out admitted he knew next to nothing about their twisted family tree. Rolling her eyes, Laika decided to give him a quick history lesson. She broke it down, counting the two of them. There were exactly 5 candidates gunning for the top spot. And minus Zeke, every single one of her siblings was deeply tied to the 4 heavyweight branch families of the Eldragon Empire. Taking the throne was such a massive deal that it had sparked a brutal turf war among all the factions. Because of this chaos, all of Zeke's half-siblings had enrolled in the Dragon's Nest to level up and represent their own camps. With this succession war turning into an absolute bloodbath, Laika desperately needed top-tier fighters in her corner to take down her older brothers. It clicked for Zeke. This was basically an all-out power struggle between the 4 main factions of the Eldragon clan. Honestly, he thought the whole thing was way too messy and kind of just wanted to tune it out again. But Laika wasn't done talking, insisting that as a prime contender for the throne, she had to max out not only her combat stats and street smarts, but also her overall clout by recruiting the strongest heavy hitters around. Cutting the chatter, she exploded forward, rushing Zeke with insane speed. She screamed that she was going to wreck him right here, right now, and make him her ultimate pawn. But Zeke casually sidestepped her earth-shattering swing, effortlessly weaving through her furious combo of slashes without even breaking a sweat. Yet Laika stayed glued to him like a shadow, refusing to give him an inch. The crowd, absolute, dropped jaws. These two were clashing at blistering warp speed levels. Even while lugging around a massive buster sword, Laika's combos chained together flawlessly. Every single swing looked as smooth as butter. Watching this insane sibling deathmatch unfold, the bystanders couldn't keep quiet. They hyped up her god-tier control over source energy, catching on that her slashes were ramping up, hitting way quicker, and packing way more heat with every passing second. Everyone was practically starstruck by the raw dominance of the Patriarch's actual bloodline, hailing straight from the core family branch. A few guys in the back were already calling G was completely set in stone. But here is the wild twist: those clueless NPCs had zero idea that Laika was quietly raging out of her mind. She was absolutely baffled on how Zeke kept ghosting through every single heavy strike she threw. Honestly, it felt like he was treating this whole deathmatch like a casual side quest. Meanwhile, Rangus, scoping out the chaos from the sidelines, was totally mind-blown. All that panic he had 5 minutes the second he clocked Zeke's ice-cold, totally unbothered footwork. Peeling back, Zeke threw out a smirk and dropped a comment, saying Laika's combat style was something totally off the radar. He gave credit where it was due, admitting her agility that was leagues beyond your average 1-star rookie. But Laika was not having it. Completely triggered, she barked at him to shut his mouth and take this showdown seriously. Zeke just locked his and casually clapped back that he was dialed in from the start. And because he was fully locked in, he could casually drop a nuke of a counter without breaking a sweat. Boom! His fist buried right into her gut, making Laika hack and choke from the sheer brutal impact. Her knees hit the dirt instantly. She clutched her stomach, gasping for air while using her giant sword just to stay anchored. The entire crowd collectively gasped. The gossip mill went into absolute overdrive right then and there. They were totally baffled. Like, how did this dude weave through Laika's terrifying barrage without taking a single scratch? And seriously, who was this absolute unit of a kid? Forcing herself back on her feet, Laika angrily demanded to know why her blade kept slicing thin air. She knew her stats. Against any other 1-star scrub, her speed was undeniably top tier. So math-wise, Zeke keeping pace was practically impossible. Shrugging, Zeke didn't cap. He agreed her speed completely outclassed every 1-star he had ever faced. But to him, she was still just stuck in the 1-star leagues. "You are literally a 1-star too," Laika screamed, totally losing her cool, yelling that he had absolutely zero right to mirror her insane momentum. There is honestly a super basic reason for that, Zeke shot back. The way you breathe, where your eyes dart, even the micro twitches in your shoulders before you swing. I am downloading all that data in real time. I know exactly where you are swinging before you do. It is just pure battle IQ, honestly. Quit talking trash, Lika roared, rocketing forward with a hyper-speed thrust. But Zeke just gracefully sidestepped it like it was nothing, taunting her that exactly like he just explained her entire playbook was an open book to him. Before she could even blink, he fired off a brutal counterhook, launching Lika straight into the concrete wall with bone-rattling force. The audience went absolutely wild, screaming in pure shock, freaking out over whether the untouchable Lika just got completely wrecked. You actually bodied Master Lika, Rang just hollered, hyping him up. But Zeke didn't even flinch deadpan, dropping the reality check that round 1 was not done yet. This boss fight was far from over, as Lika hauled herself up, battered, bleeding, but completely unyielding. Zeke's eyes narrowed, noticing how she clustered her aura, straight into her solar plexus, tanking that lethal hit like an absolute boss. A tiny, arrogant smirk crept onto his face, as he mentally gave her props. Lika was undeniably a built-different prodigy. Please stop, Master Lika, Rangus begged, practically crying, but Zeke ordered him to back up into the safety zone, warning the blast radius of their next clash would be totally lethal. Suddenly, Zeke's radar went off. An insanely dense wild energy was erupting straight out of Lika's body. He raised an eyebrow. Did she seriously just level up to 2-star mid-battle? The crowd felt that suffocating pressure drop too. There was zero room for doubt. That blinding rate that she had just broken her limits, officially hitting 2-star status with a blazing white aura. Hitting the 2-star tier meant you could literally weaponize your raw source energy, projecting it as a visible physical aura around your strikes. Wiping her mouth, Lika actually thanked Zeke. She smirked, telling him that getting pushed to the absolute was the exact cheat code she needed to trigger her 2-star awakening way ahead of schedule. But sadly for you, she proclaimed, eyes locked on him, that means your win condition just dropped to 0%. Her aura erupted like a flare as she launched herself straight at Zeke. Searing pure energy coiled around her massive blade. Zeke just laughed, completely hyped. You leveled up big time, he cheered effortlessly, sidestepping a deadly high-speed slash. Your speed is insane right now, but his cocky grin vanished the second a sharp sting grazed his cheek. A thin trail of blood. Wait, I definitely lied, dodged that Zeke realized, his mind racing. Lika flashed a wicked smirk. Starting to feel the gap between us yet, she taunted. This is what I'm really capable of, she bragged. Now that I've hit a solid 2-star rank and unlocked my aura, I'm about to show you what the true Thunder Greatsword can actually— Oh, so I get front row seats to a brand new fighting style? Zeke beamed, his adrenaline spiking. Honestly, this was shaping up to be the absolute peak of their entire brawl for him. Without warning, Lika triggered her signature move, Lightning Flash. Blinding golden volts violently sparked off her blade as she closed the distance. A vicious thunderstorm of electricity swallowed Zeke whole, forcing him to slide backward. Whoa, hold up. What kind of crazy move was that? He yelled over the static. Controlling raw lightning. Isn't this a bit overkill for a sparring match? Lika just grinned violently, plunging her sword into the dirt as golden shockwaves pulsed around her. Shocked, she teased, instantly chaining into her next attack. Lightning net. Lethal sparks exploded from the ground, weaving a massive glowing grid of electricity that blasted toward Zeke, but he barely flipped out of the kill zone. Hitting the dirt with a heavy thud, he whispered to himself. Her raw output has skyrocketed. She is operating on a whole different tier now. Yeah, this definitely won't be a walk in the park. The crowd erupted into stunned whispers. Their jaws were practically glued to the floor. The second Lika hit that 2-star milestone, the entire momentum of this duel completely flipped. Sweating bullets on the sidelines, Rangus felt his anxiety hit the ceiling. Zeke quickly caught on. Lika's footwork was basic, pretty much identical to her 1-star, but the pure destructive momentum behind every single slash was off the charts. Her blade was literally bleeding power with that golden aura turbocharging every swing. But what really caught Zeke off guard was her insane velocity. She was blitzing him way faster than his reflexes predicted. Plus, there was an eerie, unpredictable vibe to her electricity. Still, he didn't sweat it. Even if she was practically wearing a thunderstorm, he knew he could shut it down. His curiosity, though, totally piqued. What exactly is this energy? What kind of lightning is she bending? Dancing through her endless barrage of strikes, he locked his eyes on her, heavily analyzing the timing and flow of her aura. Catching that chilled-out smirk on Zeke's face as he ghosted her attacks, Lika's expression darkened. Still smiling? You're way too relaxed for a real fight, she spat. Let's see if you're still grinning after this. She exploded forward again. Channeling swift thunder, she wrapped her entire body in a blinding cocoon of golden volts. Once again, Zeke slipped away at the absolute last microsecond. She really is as fast as lightning, he thought. But then Laika aggressively redirected her heavy blade mid-sprint. Bam! The massive strike connected, blasting Zeke through the air on a brutal shockwave. A massive cloud of dirt and shattered rock ripped across the arena. Rangas choked on a gasp, sprinting toward Zeke in a state of pure panic. A random spectator quickly yanked his arm to hold him back. But out of the smoke, Zeke simply stood back. He up his gear absolutely torched, but his vibe totally unfazed. Laika didn't let up. She fired off another brutal lightning flash, scoring a direct hit. Yet, when the dust cleared, Zeke was still standing like a brick wall. How was he not on the ground? Laika gasped, her eyes wide with absolute shock. Rangas frantically rushed the field, screaming his lungs out. Master Laika, cut the aura. That's enough. You've totally proved your strength. But Laika shut him down, her voice dripping with ice. Are you completely dense? Rangas, bailing in the middle of a death match, is basically spitting in Zeke's face. Panicking, Rangas whipped around to his friend. Please, boss Zeke, just tap out. You've taken enough. Hearing this, Laika let out a dark little laugh. The sidekick makes a solid point. Look at the absolute state of you. Throwing in the towel is your smartest move. Drop to your knees, swear allegiance to me, and I'll let you live. Instead of groveling, Zeke just flashed a quiet, knowing smirk. Laika's gaze turned razor sharp. I'll give you this much. Even with outcast blood running through your veins, your elder dragon pride is the real deal. She taunted, her voice laced with venom. Hoisting her massive blade toward the sky, a terrifying pressure exploded from her body. If dying on your feet is what you want, I'll obliterate you with everything I've got. Above them, the sky ripped open with a deafening crack of thunder. Unlocking her first hidden art, Heaven's Thunder, she brought down a blinding pillar of golden electricity that completely pulverized the arena floor beneath Zeke. Jagged bolts of divine wrath hammered into him mercilessly. Rangas screamed in pure horror as his best friend vanished inside a blinding cage of golden voltage. Thick black smoke billowed off a completely scorched silhouette. Plunging her heavy blade into the rubble to steady herself, Laika let out a long, heavy breath and murmured, My apologies, Zeke, but your journey stops here. Suddenly cutting straight through the static and smoke, a familiar voice drifted out. Oh, is that a fact? In a heartbeat, an ultra-bright pillar of golden static erupted straight into the clouds. Laika's jaw practically hit the floor as she whipped her head around. No way. That's literally impossible. Where the hell did you get a lightning aura? She choked out. There stood Zeke, chilling like absolutely nothing happened, with golden sparks violently arcing across his bare skin. Oh, so this static stuff is a lightning aura, huh? He shrugged nonchalantly. If you're wondering how I snagged it, honestly, I don't have a clue. He sounded totally unbothered, but that flex sent absolute shockwaves through the bleachers. Bullshit, Laika gasped out, her brain completely short-circuiting at the sight. Zeke flashed a sinister grin. Honestly, I face-tanked those hits on purpose. I needed a front-row seat to study your energy. How it spikes, how the currents travel through the nervous system. And wouldn't you know it, my body just sort of copied the homework. That is total crap, Laika's inner voice screamed in denial. Internally, Zeke broke down the insane reality he really had acted as a human lightning rod just because her raw power caught his attention. While eating every single one of her lethal strikes, he was secretly running his Dragon King's breath technique on a continuous. That bizarre synergy between his ancient breathing rhythm and her electric shocks forced the golden energy to literally pool inside his core. Before he even processed what was happening, he hijacked the element for himself. She must have some crazy mutated genetics, he theorized. Looking at how her family handles that massive sword, this electric cheat code is probably baked right into their bloodline. Zeke sauntered toward her, dripping with swagger. Gotta admit, I heavily underestimated how busted lightning-type source energy actually is. This little clash turned out to be the ultimate grind session. Flashing her a cocky smile, he dropped the bomb, major props to you, Laika. You just helped me hit the 2-star rank. Golden arcs violently supercharged around his frame as he hyped up the crowd. Round 2 starts right now. Letting out a feral scream, Laika blitzed forward. Her massive blade pulsed with lethal voltage, ripping through the air with another retina-burning slash. But Zeke just ghosted past the blade like it was moving in slow motion, pivoting to launch a brutal counter. Except the second he twitched a muscle, he literally blinked out of existence, teleporting all the way to the complete opposite edge of the arena. Wait, what the hell just happened? He mumbled to himself. Then it clicked, absorbing that massive wave of source energy, basically gave his entire muscular and nervous system a hypercharged upgrade. This new electric aura completely rewired my hardware. My base speed is so glitched right now, I can't even steer. Up in the spectator seats, Rangus was absolutely paralyzed with shock. His eyes couldn't even track the fight anymore. Down in the ring, both combatants were nothing but streaking flashes of gold and thunderclaps. Am I tripping right now, or has Leica been whiffing every single shot he thought wildly? Losing her absolute mind. Leica shrieked, "Are you just trolling me right now, Zeke? Quit playing games with me." "I'm really not," Zeke responded with zero panic. "But I'll give you credit, you're actually dangerous." He closed the gap in a millisecond, throwing a devastating roundhouse kick. Leica barely got her massive sword up in time to block, but the raw kinetic impact sent her violently skidding backward. Zeke casually cracked his neck, a dangerous smirk creeping onto his face. "All right, playtime is officially over." "Playtime is over," Leica echoed, narrowing her eyes. "Yeah," Zeke smirked. "I've actually been brainstorming a brand new move. For a hot minute now, and honestly, this feels like the perfect test." "Inventing a new move?" she gasped, totally mind-blown. Zeke just nodded. "Spot on." He paused, tapping his chin as he muttered to himself. "Should I label this a first form, or maybe a special form?" Leica just blinked, utterly lost. Like, did this guy even get standard combat training? What crazy bloodline did he pick that up from? She panicked, her brain going into overdrive. But before she could even process it, Zeke materialized right beside her, in a literal flash, raw lightning exploding from his palm. Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. Special Form. Lightning Peak. He roared. The blast slammed right into her, swallowing her whole in a raging tornado of golden electricity. Her entire body convulsed. Her blade clattered to the floor as she dropped to her knees, sparks still violently snapping off her skin. Dead silence dropped over the entire arena. Rangus and the crew were completely shell-shocked. Zeke actually took the dub. Sprawled out on the ground, Leica let out a ragged, shaky breath. Seconds later, she pushed herself up, still shivering. "I can't believe I got wrecked. I was destined to be the next head of the family. I refused to take an L. Not to anyone," she gritted her teeth. But then Zeke strolled up, extending a hand. "You were insane out there, Leica." "Legitimately overpowered," he praised without an ounce of irony. "It's always a rush picking up fresh skills. This clash was 100% worth it." Flashing a warm smile, he threw in, "It'd be super lame if this was our final showdown, right? We definitely need to run this back sometime." Leica practically blue-screened, a heavy blush painting her cheeks as she locked eyes with his offered hand. Even though she just got absolutely dusted, the tiniest, softest smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Maybe it was lingering pride, or maybe for the very first time, pure respect. Doubling down, Zeke insisted they hit the training grounds again real soon. Flashing that cocky grin, he hyped up how pumped he was for round 2. Looking totally flustered, Leica finally reached out, admitting she got completely outclassed this time, and that she was taking this L like an absolute champ. Fast forward a few hours. Deep in the heart of a chaotic dimensional rift, Balza, Eldraden, the hardcore patriarch to both Leica and Zeke, and the reigning boss of the entire Eldraden bloodline, stood completely swarmed by an endless sea of savage, bloodthirsty beasts. As the monsters stampeded toward him, Balza's eyes ignited with a terrifying, blinding glow. Detonating a suffocating shockwave of pure dragon aura, he instantly paralyzed the entire horde. Unsheathing his blade, Balza triggered the first form, Genesis of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. In one terrifyingly smooth slash, every single beast caught in his radius was sliced wide open, right down the middle. As his sword clicked back into its scabbard, the elite Eldraden troops swarmed the battlefield to completely wipe out any stragglers, lucky enough to survive their master's ultimate nuke. Balza pivoted toward the rift's exit, ready to dip, but a soldier frantically yelled out, claiming he had some top-tier intel. Balza hit the brakes and demanded the news. The guard nervously reported that Lady Leica had officially cracked the 2-star power tier. Hearing that, Balza froze right in his tracks. His glowing eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to absolute zero. "And your point is?" The soldier, practically sweating bullets, scrambled to explain that hitting 2 stars at just 7 years old was a totally unheard-of flex. He hyped up Leica's insane potential, swearing that once she graduated from the Dragon's Nest, she had easily skyrocket to the 4-star tier, or hell, maybe even shatter the 5-star ceiling. Balza's comeback was ice cold. Talent means absolutely nothing. Next time you open your mouth, you better tell me how she's actually useful to this empire. If you ever waste my time with trash updates like this again, you need to vanish from my sight right now. The guard swallowed his words, completely frozen, as Bowser marched straight for the rift's gateway. But right before he crossed the threshold, the guard blurted out that Lika had just gotten absolutely wrecked in a duel. Bowser froze in his tracks. He tilted his head over his shoulder, his face completely deadpan. "Did one of her brothers take her down?" he demanded. The guard frantically shook his head. "Negative, master. She got completely floored by a kid her own age, by Lord Zeke." "Zeke!" Bowser echoed, his voice dropping dangerously low. "That woman's kid." Flashes of an ordinary servant girl flooded his mind. "Zeke's mother. She was an absolute beast on the battlefield," he whispered to himself. "Shame she passed away right after having the kid." He spun all the way around, glaring daggers at the guard. "Spill it! Who on earth coached Zeke into crushing a 2-star warrior?" The guard choked on his words for a split second. "Absolutely nobody, master. Lord Zeke hasn't had a single drop of formal coaching. He overpowered Lady Lika using pure raw talent and zero help. Honestly, the kid has already hit the 2-star milestone himself." "Is that so?" Balza muttered, his tone totally icy. Pivoting away once again, he gave the chilling order. "Kick off the first trial, now." The guard flinched, looking completely blindsided. "Master Balza, please excuse my disrespect, but isn't it way too early to drop the first trial on them? It has barely been one single month since the rookies kicked off. Most of these kids haven't even sniffed the 1-star rank yet," Balza snapped. "I don't give a damn. The Grim Reaper doesn't check his watch, check your rank, or play favorite. Only the absolute apex predators get to breathe tomorrow. Star ranks are absolute garbage if you snap during the first trial. Anyone who chokes doesn't deserve to carry the Eldritch bloodline." "Understood, master," the guard stammered out, but Balza wasn't finished. "Also, call in Freya. Tell her to drag herself back here immediately." The guard's jaw practically hit the floor. "Freya, master? Wait, you mean that Freya?" Balza gave a single solid nod. "Exactly. If Zeke managed to absolutely fold Lika using nothing but his own raw grit, then this kid is infinitely more fascinating than I gave him credit for. I need Freya to personally craft and oversee this entire bloodbath, and she better keep her eyes glued to every single rookie." The guard gave a heavy, trembling bow. "Consider it done, Master Balza." And for the first time in forever, a ghost of a smirk crept onto Balza's face. A bizarrely warm spark lit up his cold eyes as he murmured, "He really is the wildest wild card of them all." The following morning at Dragon's Nest, the squad was sweating it out, grinding through their sparring sessions. But Zeke, he was off in his own zone, hyper-focused on leveling up his breath control. Bro was locked in a brutal invisible chair pose, balancing an absolute unit of a boulder on his skull, while gripping heavy iron in each fist. His insane dedication definitely turned heads, leaving Rangui and the rest of the crew just staring totally speechless. Eyes shut tight, Zeke was mentally dissecting the exact moves the class was supposed to be drilling. The legendary Strike Dragon sequence. From what he remembered, the 15th Patriarch originally cooked up this specific fighting style. Sure, people labeled it an offensive art, but deep down it was straight up a physical buffing core. Brilliantly straightforward and rock solid, making it super easy for rookies to grasp. Breaking the silence, Rangui hollered over, "Yo Zeke, you gonna jump in or what?" Popping open a single eye, Zeke shot back. "What are you talking about?" "Sparring, man," Rangui clarified. "We're supposed to be running through the Strike Dragon forms." "Already got it down?" Zeke tossed back, barely breaking a sweat. Rangui's jaw practically hit the floor. "Wait, what? The instructor literally just showed us that today. How did you max it out already?" "Because I'm built different," Zeke smirked. "But real talk right now, your core energy is totally bottlenecked." What? Rangui blinked, completely lost. Dumping the massive rock off his head, Zeke motioned for the dude to spin around. Slapping a palm onto his friend's spine, Zeke surged his own aura straight into Ranguis' system, forcefully untangling the messy mana pathways. "There, that's how your current should actually loop," he muttered. Spinning back around, Rangui was beaming. "Dude, you really did crack the code on the Strike Dragon style." That fake pouting Zeke crossed his arms. "Wow, doubting my skills, some friend you are?" No, it's not that," Rangui scrambled to explain. "Honestly, aside from my old man, literally nobody has ever coached me like this. It just makes me want to soak up every trick you know. Plus, you're rolling with moves powerful enough to floor someone as elite as Lieka. I honestly figured, that the Strike Dragon forms would be way too basic for a guy like you. It's definitely not boring, Zeke countered smoothly. If anything, I highly respect how rock-solid the foundation is. It kind of gives me flashbacks to my personal combat style, the dragon destruction. Even if his kids totally hated learning it back in the day, he thought, they always complained it was way too brutal to master. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The dragon destruction sequence was an absolute beast of a discipline. But the raw damage output, completely off the charts. The core system was broken down into 4 distinct phases. Midway through his clash with Lieka, Zeke had actually freestyled a 5th stage. Yet buried deeper still was the hidden trump card, the absolute final form. A staggeringly lethal move, the exact same one he originally sparked to butcher a literal god-tier dragon in his previous life. Staring off, he low-key wondered how his bloodline had tweaked his signature moves over the centuries. Did they patch them, evolve them? Just thinking about the possibilities got his blood pumping. Snapping back to reality, he shrugged. Anyway, since I've essentially cleared the Strike Dragon manual, I'm just gonna stick to my muscle conditioning. Flashing a quick smirk, he added, Hey everybody, unlocks these skills at their own. Before Zeke could even flex another muscle, Rangui basically shouted, Zeke, you gotta mentor me. I know I'm totally reaching here, but I desperately need a power-up. Even just a fraction of your skill. Zeke sized the guy up for a long second before giving a firm nod. Sure, I'll show you the ropes. Rangui blinked, totally shell-shocked. Wait, seriously? You're actually gonna coach me? Duh, Zeke chuckled. Why do you look like you just saw a ghost? You're the one who begged. I honestly just expected you to shoot me down. Rangui rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I don't make fake promises. Zeke fired back, his tone turning serious. Plus, I can tell you actually have the drive to learn. Out of nowhere, Lieka stepped into the circle. Looking slightly off balance, but determined, she spoke up. Zeke, I want in on this training too. Ranguiz whipped his head around, eyes wide. Wait, you too, Lieka. Folding her arms, she met his gaze without flinching. Is that an issue? Not gonna lie, I genuinely believed no one in our generation could even touch me. As a prime contender for the Eldredon family throne, my confidence was sky high. But that brutal clash yesterday, it completely pulverized my ego. I am still mind-blown over how you unlocked the lightning aura, let alone how you weaponize it way better than I ever could. Zeke let out a heavy breath. So, now I am the bad guy, he scoffed with a totally sarcastic smirk. Eyes locked and dead serious, Lieka pushed on. I have to get ruthless enough to crush our older brothers and eventually, you. Zeke, please train me. The air went dead quiet as Zeke just stared, wheels visibly turning in his head. When he ghosted her with silence, Lieka nervously pressed if he was actually cool with mentoring, considering he was literally in the running for the exact same Eldredon family crown. Rangus nodded along, totally clicking with her logic. But he still shared the bloodline of Balza Eldredon, which basically locked him into the fierce succession war completely against his will. Zeke kept it totally chill, shrugging off the rivalry, but flipped the script questioning if Lieka's wrecked body could even... He pointed out that after the absolute beating she took in the arena, those brutal gashes should have kept her benched for an entire month minimum. Lisa just brushed it off, revealing she had already downed a top-tier recovery drop, telling him to stop stressing over her health. Zeke shot Rangus a sideways glance, lowering his voice. Is that elixir seriously that broken? Rangus whispered back that if Zeke was thinking about the basic trash-tier meds from the entrance exams, there was zero chance it could patch up those fatal gashes overnight. Being the big boss's daughter, she definitely chugged some premium ultra-rare medicine. Zeke just shook his head in awe, whispering that the cheat codes in this era were actually insane. Lysa completely agreed, straight up admitting that without that healing buff, she would be paralyzed in a hospital bed for weeks. But she aggressively pivoted back to her main point: was Zeke actually down to be her mentor? She totally got that he had his own grind, but she was desperate to level up under his insane expertise. Without skipping a single beat, Zeke locked it in, dropping a line about how he could never reject youth fueled by hardcore ambition. That boomer energy response left both Lieka and Rangus completely stunned. Lysa snapped back that he was literally their age, while Rangus chimed in, highlighting they were all basically peers. Zeke cracked a grin, playing along. Then switching to a totally smug vibe, Zeke challenged if she was absolutely certain about bowing down to him as her teacher, especially since he was the exact guy who just wrecked her. But Lieka's eyes burned with iron resolve. She could not care less about her pride. She was way past the point of being picky. If she was going to snatch the Eldredon family throne, she had to mutate into an absolute beast, whatever the cost. Zeke's mind flashed back to their very first run-in, where she had obsessively hyped up her endgame of ruling the clan. He finally questioned why she was so insanely hyper. Lysa dropped a heavy truth bomb if she choked and lost the succession. She would just be sold off as a bargaining chip in some arranged political marriage. Her voice dripped with absolute disgust, revealing that her so-called best-case scenario was being forced to tie the knot with her own cousin. And the nightmare scenario? Getting chained to some random faceless stranger. Instantly, the playful vibe died. Zeke's entire aura, pure rage sparking in his eyes as he demanded to know what she meant. Lika just gave a hollow stare, replying that it was just the brutal reality of their world. You gotta understand just how insanely prized the Eldragon bloodline actually was, especially when it came to the four main branches of the family. Their source energy wasn't just rare, it was a total cheat code with endless applications, which perfectly explains why the higher-ups were ruthlessly obsessed with keeping their genetics absolutely flawless. A violent shiver ripped through Rangus as a suffocating, blood-chilling aura randomly exploded out of Zeke. His tone dropped to a razor-sharp whisper, growling that the Eldragon clan was seriously crossing the line into pure sickness. His knuckles violently cracked as he balled his hands into tight fists, swearing right then and there to completely obliterate these twisted trash-tier traditions. But before the vibe could get any heavier, a squad of instructors abruptly pulled up, completely snatching everyone's attention. Lyka blinked, totally thrown off by their sudden spawn, while Zeke aggressively muttered that their timing was absolute garbage. He was low-key stressing over whether they'd just caught his whole villain monologue. Suddenly, a fierce woman rocking blazing crimson hair stepped out from the shadows. One of the staff instantly announced that as of today they'd be answering to a brand new boss. Flexing that despite her insane schedule, she was dropping everything to personally mentor them, so they'd better be bowing down in gratitude. Gliding forward, the fiery-haired woman extended a hand right at Lyka, casually asking if she was the famous Lady Lyka. Every single alarm bell in Lyka's head screamed danger, making her instinctively launch herself backward to create space. Zeke immediately stepped up like a human shield, while Rangus practically death-gripped his arm in pure panic. The woman just smirked, throwing out some casual praise for Lyka's lightning-fast reflexes, and noting that her aura was actually pretty cracked. Zeke's brow fiercely scrunched up. He hadn't picked up a single blip on his radar until she was basically breathing down their necks. Sweating bullets, Rangus stuttered out a question about her identity, prompting the staff to officially introduce her as Lady Freya. Freya Phoenix, a literal demon from the legendary Black Dragon Corps. Flashing a terrifyingly polite smile, Freya hit the group with a smooth greeting. Claiming it was an absolute honor to meet them, her piercing gaze suddenly locked directly onto Zeke as she asked if he was Lord Zeke. The second he nodded, she tilted her head, asking if he wasn't even a little spooked by her stealthy pop-up. Without missing a beat, Zeke deadpanned that absolutely nothing she did could faze him. Freya practically short-circuited for a split second, as a faint otherworldly glow flickered inside Zeke's eye. He casually tossed out that her little cloaking technique was actually pretty fascinating. It instantly clicked for Freya why the big boss Balsa Eldragon was so hyped about this kid, while Zeke was busy mentally dissecting her every twitch. He clocked that all her source energy was completely funneled into her legs, moving in a wild, unpredictable rhythm he'd never witnessed before. No wonder she moved like an absolute ghost. A psycho thrill flashed in his pupils as he internally geeked out over whatever martial arts she was running. Snapping back to business, Freya seized total control of the room, loudly confirming her new role as their headmaster. The entire class erupted into shocked, frantic whispering, totally unable to process the news. Lady Freya, better known as the Tempest Wind, was universally feared as an absolute unit, and one of the staff quickly backed it up, confirming she was a beastly 6-star warrior, straight out of the Black Dragon Corps. That elite hit squad operated exclusively for the head honcho, leaving the students completely starry-eyed and terrified. No one could wrap their heads around why a VIP of her caliber was slumming it as a teacher at their academy. Flashing another elusive smirk, Freya swore she'd mold them into warriors, but only if they met one brutal condition. They just had to clear a simple little entrance exam. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd the second the words left her mouth. She told them to chill, insisting the rules were super basic. Just snatch a glowing crystal exactly like the one she was currently flexing. Oh, and somehow survive 30 straight days trapped inside the cursed Poison Dragon Mountain. Rangus instantly lost all color in his face, while Zeke just caught a weird wave of nostalgia. That Nightmare Mountain, he internally noted, was basically a breeding ground for a million different lethal venomous monsters. Even grazing a single random leaf would instantly flatline an average human. The place was a literal death trap. Zeke casually reminisced about his past life, remembering how he used to treat that hellscape like his own personal gym. Even so, he had to admit that dropping a bunch of rookie students into that meat grinder was a ridiculously sad. Ignoring their terrified faces, Freya coldly started laying. Every single rookie was handed a fragile crystal orb. Shatter it or lose it, boom. You're instantly booted from the trials. When one trembling kid stuttered out what getting disqualified actually meant, Freya didn't sugarcoat it. They'd be kicked straight out of the dragon's nest. No second chances. She casually brushed off the mountain's lethal toxins. As long as they locked in and channeled the dragon's breathing technique, they wouldn't drop dead. Keep a tight grip on the orb, pace your lungs, and you might just make it out breathing. But Laika quickly chimed in, pointing out the elephant in the room. The toxic flora was bad, but what about the bloodthirsty beasts roaming around? Freya's gaze turned icy. She shot back that hunting down those exact monsters was because that mutant meat was their absolute only food source. No kills meant starving out before the week was even up. A wave of pure terror washed over the crowd. Retin, completely pale, choked out that it was basically a suicide mission. Whispers erupted as the rookies realized their entry-level strike dragon combos probably wouldn't even scratch those mutated freaks. Freya flashed a wicked smirk and told them to chill out. The clock was ticking. They had exactly 5 days to gear up. In that tiny window, every trainee got access to the Dragon family vault to snag one foundational weapon manual. Master the form and you bump up your survival odds. Flop during this 5-day crunch time. Well, she washed her hands of whatever gruesome fate awaited them on that peak. One terrified recruit squeaked out a question, begging to know if the instructors would step in if things went sideways. Freya let out a villainous laugh, her voice dripping with venom. You are standing inside the dragon's nest, the absolute territory of the Dragon bloodline. Fragile kids don't last a minute here. Only the apex predators make it out. If you can't solo a couple of stray beasts, you might as well take a permanent nap right next to them. 6 feet deep in toxic soil. The sheer menace in her tone left the students shaking. Cold sweat pooled on their foreheads. Rangus looked ready to bawl his eyes out, while Laika went completely mute, her gears turning. Off to the side, Zeke practically scowled. He internally questioned if this cutthroat clan was even the same Dragon family he used to know. The vibe was insanely twisted compared to his glory days as the Supreme. Snapping the tension, Freya announced that playtime was over. She started tossing out combat manuals for every weapon class imaginable, barking at the rookies to step up and claim their lethal discipline. As the mob of students scrambled over the loot, Rangus totally froze, paralyzed by the choices. Zeke leaned in and nudged him toward a polearm manual. He reminded the big guy that he had already crushed the entrance exams wielding a spear. Stick to the meta. Rangus's face lit up with relief. He grabbed the book and dropped a quick breath. Laika reached for a massive greatsword scroll, figuring she could just build off her baseline lightning greatsword combos. But Zeke blocked her hand. He locked eyes with her and told her to pivot to an axe build instead. Confused, she asked what the catch was. Zeke broke it down, explaining that heavy axe swings would perfectly patch up her current combat blind spots. Because it came straight from Zeke, she didn't even argue. She gave a silent nod, betting her life on his game sense. Freya's voice cracked like a whip, demanding to know if everyone had locked in their selections. Seeing their nods, she ordered them to grind non-stop for the next 5 days. Their entire existence hinged on fully digesting those pages. Slack off, and they'd end up as pathetic corpses rotting away on the Poison Dragon peak. She pivoted on her heel to walk away, but suddenly paused, flashing one last sinister glance over her shoulder. Oh right, she almost forgot the best part. During the trial, the upperclassmen would be active. Rangus's jaw practically hit the floor as he stammered out, asking what the hell. Freya drops an absolute bombshell. The 10-year veteran seniors are taking this exact same exam. Only catch, their entire mission is to hunt down the rookies and snatch their orbs. She throws them a bone, mentioning the freshmen have a massive numbers advantage. Plus, with Poison Dragon Mountain being so insanely huge, a few lucky squads might actually. But make no mistake, those veterans are going full try hard to track and obliterate them. Dropping that mic, Freya just turns and dips. Rangus is absolutely losing his mind. Sweating bullets, he panics, begging to know how they are supposed to survive this nightmare. As if toxic deadly beasts weren't bad enough now, they have human predators on their tails. Laika's expression darkens. She points out that every single upperclassman is sitting at a 1-star rank or way higher. If they jump her all at once, she is totally toast, meaning the rest of their class is basically cannon fodder. Zeke totally agrees. He points out that if Laika can't solo this, she needs to squad up with 2 or 3 others. Teaming up is completely legal, giving them a fighting chance against both the monsters and the hunters. When Rangus nervously asks what Zeke is plotting, our guy casually drops that he is flying solo just to vibe and actually enjoy the slaughterfest. Laika just lets out a heavy sigh. Honestly, that is peak Zeke behavior. Before they grind out some training, Zeke insists they grab some food first. Watching him walk off, Laika shoots Rangus a look, asking if he thinks Zeke is totally unhinged sometimes. Rangus just shrugs. Yeah, just a little bit. Flash forward 5 days. The entire class is lined up at the base of Poison Dragon Mountain, basically choking on a mix of pure dread and hyped-up adrenaline. Freya stands front and center, flashing a wicked smirk. Perfect weather for a little survival test, she announces. Shaking in his boots, Rangus mutters that 0 hour is finally here. Even though Zeke literally orchestrated this entire squad setup, Rangus is heavily doubting himself, wondering if a nobody like him even deserves to stand next to Lady Laika. She could have handpicked top-tier nobles, instead she chose a 0-star commoner who is barely scraping by. We are literally in the same boat, Rangus, a voice chimes in. He whips around to see Raymond and Celine standing right there. Celine, repping the East Hall of Dragon's Nest, admits she is also a total commoner. She is still tripping out over being drafted into Lady Laika's personal squad for this absolute death trap of a mountain. Raymond, another East Hall recruit, just flashes Laika a warm, respectful smile. But Laika immediately shuts that imposter syndrome down. Noble or commoner, she literally couldn't care less. She drafted them because she sees their raw talent and undeniable potential. That hits Rangus right in the feels. Taking a beat, he clenches his spear with a newfound fire, swearing he gets it now. He promises to grind out of his mind and absolutely not drag the squad down. Raymond backs him up, pledging to go all in and make their leader proud. Lighting up with a brilliant smile, Laika, cheers. I am totally counting on you guys. Pivoting back to Zeke, she raises an eyebrow. Is he seriously still planning to lone wolf this? With absolute main character energy, Zeke just nods. He is literally itching for the chaos to start. Still trembling, Celine confesses she is completely in awe of the two of them. While she is over here having a panic attack, Zeke is practically yawning at the thought of soloing Poison Dragon Mountain. Raymond points out that their insanely high confidence just makes sense, considering they literally have top-tier clan leader. But Laika instantly pumps the brakes on that logic, telling him to stop comparing her to Zeke. She is actually stressing out big time. You're stressed, Zeke asks, completely clueless. Why? Not even counting you, the rest of this squad looks absolutely cracked. The entire group instantly pushes back, shouting that there are about 1,000,000 reasons to be terrified right now. Stepping up, Laika asks Zeke point blank if he genuinely thinks her drafted team has what it takes. Without missing a beat, Zeke tells her absolutely. He internally smirked, realizing Laika had straight up recruited the absolute heavy hitters of the academy. Her radar for raw talent was honestly insane. He gave massive props to their squad's rock-solid offense and ironclad defense, hyping them up by saying this survival exam would be an absolute breeze. No doubt, Rangus muttered, a nervous bead of sweat sliding down his jaw. You're always way too cocky, Zeke. Freya scanned the crowd to check if everyone was present, quickly noticing that practically all the rookies had already clicked up. Honestly, since most of them were still total noobs with their weapons squatting up, was a solid survival strat. Stepping right into the spotlight, Freya declared that the bloodbath was about to kick off. She drilled the rules into their heads one last time. Survive for 1 grueling month, deep inside Poison Dragon Mountain, and guard their crystal orbs with their lives. Keep the glowing sphere safe, and you pass. Lose it, and you're out. Since every single orb looked exactly the same, losing yours meant you could totally just snatch someone else's. Panic rippled through the crowd of rookies, but Zeke's eyes lit up, realizing that absolute grand theft was 100% allowed. Freya didn't stop there. She dropped the real bomb once the freshmen set up camp. The ruthless upperclassmen would drop in to hijack their loot. The seniors snickered from the sidelines, trash-talking the newbies, because barely any of them had even cracked the 1-star rank. To them, stealing those orbs was going to be like taking candy from a baby. Hearing the disrespect hit Zeke's classmates with a wave of pure dread, adrenaline, and heavy paranoia. Wrapping up the briefing, Freya screamed go, and the tidal wave of students instantly bolted toward the treacherous peaks of Poison Dragon Mountain. Watching the chaos unfold, Zeke caught Laika's voice cutting through the noise, ordering him to stay alive. He flashed a laid-back grin, promising he wouldn't bite the dust, but told them to make sure they made it out too. As Lika rallied her squad and Zeke threw up a peace sign to wish them luck, Freya locked eyes with him. "Time to step into hell, Zeke," she called out. "My bad," he casually replied, apologizing for spacing out. "Spacing out," Freya echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Are you not sweating this at all?" "Not really." Zeke brushed her off with a chillingly calm smile, strolling casually toward the death trap. Freya stared at his back internally, noting that this kid was built completely different. Later that night, back at the base camp, a senior instructor sidled up to Freya, questioning if the rookies were actually going to survive this meat grinder. When she played dumb, he bluntly stated that throwing fresh meat into this brutal exam was way too premature. Another proctor chimed in, arguing that these kids had barely survived a few months at Dragon's Nest, and essentially nobody had hit that 1-star milestone. Plus, their actual battlefield experience was literally zero. He heavily doubted any of them were making it out in one piece. Freya totally brushed off their panic, telling them to chill. Sure, the forest was crawling with venomous monsters, but the vast majority were just basic 1- or 2-star fodder, nowhere near strong enough to completely wipe a squad. Flashing a terrifyingly sweet smile, she promised the kids would be just fine, but then slipping into a low, sinister whisper, she muttered that she was totally going to unleash that monstrosity later. Catching her dark tone, the instructor flinched and asked what she just said. Freya immediately masked her psycho energy with a sweet grin. "Oh, nothing at all," she chirped. Spinning around, she blasted the announcement that the senior students were officially off the leash. The veterans bolted into the dark woods like hungry wolves, their eyes practically glowing with malice as they gripped their blades. Watching the hunters deploy, Freya whispered to herself, "Let's see who's still breathing by morning." I am absolutely yearning to see the aftermath. Cut to the heart of Poison Dragon Mountain, where the upperclassmen had already started their ruthless purge. It didn't take long for one of the hunters to lock onto fresh prey, and the target was literally just Zeke, standing completely dead still near the entrance, like an AFK player. "The rest of the noobs scurried in ages ago," one senior scoffed. "Is this kid actually brain dead?" Sneering, another senior cranked his crossbow and lined up a lethal headshot. But right before that projectile could pierce him, Zeke snatched it right out. While the upperclassman's jaw practically hit the floor, Zeke casually splintered the shaft in two. "Took you guys long enough," he grinned. One of the goons stammered, demanding to know what he was talking about, but his buddy just barked that it totally did not matter. Were they seriously ignoring how he just grabbed that arrow bare-handed? Without missing a single beat, Zeke lunged straight into the chaos. His eyes practically glowing with pure hype, he flashed a wicked smirk. "Let us play a little game." Meanwhile, deep inside the shadows of Poison Dragon Mountain, Celine's squad was getting... Just as Celine butchered a gigantic, grotesque frog, another mutant amphibian launched itself straight at her blind spot. Raymond instantly whipped up his shield, absorbing the brutal impact and pulling Celine from the jaws of death with 0 seconds to spare. Channeling pure muscle, he slammed his heavy shield. Then he mercilessly rammed the metal edge deep into its flesh, finishing it off on the spot. Catching a glimpse of Rangus effortlessly wrecking his own target, Raymond flashed a proud... Leica chimed in, totally hyped about their flawless tag team synergy. Rangus nodded, throwing her a massive thank you. But his eyes practically bugged out of his skull when he noticed the literal mountain of slaughtered frog demons Leica had just soloed. Completely blown away, Celine admitted that Leica's combat skills were just built differently. Honestly, it was exactly what they anticipated from her. Raymond nodded in agreement. While they were sweating buckets just fighting a handful of creeps, Leica had basically eradicated the entire horde without breaking a sweat. Leica just gave a casual shrug, tossing it off like no big deal. She was a 2-star warrior after all. To her, these trash mobs were literally just a light stretch. She then pointed out that a solid week had already burned away since the trials kicked off. The whole squad had leveled up like crazy, especially Celine and Raymond, who had officially clawed their way to the 1-star rank. Celine poured her heart out, swearing they never would have skyrocketed this fast without Leica coaching them, while Raymond totally backed her up. Rangus, on the flip side, just kept his mouth completely shut. He was internally spiraling, realizing just how brutally he was lagging behind now that his friends were officially 1-star heavyweights. Celine immediately caught that gloomy shadow crossing his face. With a super warm tone, she promised him that his glow-up was coming, and he would hit that 1-star milestone soon enough. Raymond totally agreed, hyping him up to stay patient and just keep grinding. Feeling the good vibes from his crew, Rangus cracked a soft smile and thanked them for the mental boost. That is when Leica jumped in, reminding everyone that Rangus had literally pulverized 3 giant mutant frogs, which was an absolutely insane flex. She threw in the fact that before all, the dude had practically weaponized his spear wielding to absolute perfection. So, grabbing that 1-star rank, yeah, that was practically guaranteed at this point. Completely hit in the feels by her massive confidence in him, Rangus was borderline tearing up, while Lika glanced up at the fading sky. She signaled that pitch blackness was creeping in fast, warning the squad that it was time to haul it back to camp. Celine was entirely on board, stressing that Poison Dragon Mountain turns into an absolute death trap once the sun goes down. But halfway through their trek back, Lika instantly froze in her tracks. Rangus quickly asked what was going down, but got nothing but dead silence in return. Her face dropped into a deadly glare as she stared deep into the woods, aggressively demanding to know why some random cadet was lurking around their territory. A split second later, a shady silhouette stepped right out of the overgrown weeds. The sudden ambush completely rattled Rangus and the rest of the crew. Going pure survival mode, Celine and Raymond instantly ripped their weapons from their sheaths. The mysterious guy strolled into the clearing with a toxic smirk dangling his weapon like it was a toy. Gotta admit, he chuckled. I really did not expect you to sniff me out this fast, Lika. Lika instantly clocked the guy as an upperclassman straight up asking if he was here to snatch their crystal. The second he smirked and nodded, she knew the moment had finally arrived. An older student was actually bold enough to ambush her squad. And to make things spicy, this guy was rocking 2 stars. Flashing a cocky grin, the senior explained, his exam was he just never imagined his very first prey would end up being the legendary Lady Lika's crew. Lika stared him down, questioning if he seriously had a death wish hanging around, after realizing exactly whose turf he just stepped on. She coldly warned him that a solo upperclassman would get absolutely wrecked against her, but the older student's smirk twisted into something wildly sinister. Whoever said I was flying solo, he mocked. Right on cue, 3 more upperclassmen slithered out from the tall grass, every single. The ringleader scoffed, boasting that even a prodigy like Lika was completely cooked, especially since she was carrying a bunch of dead weight. Ripping his blade from its sheath, he barked at them to fold immediately and cough up their crystal orbs. Without missing a beat, he lunged straight for Lika, unleashing a devastating slash. But she sidestepped it like it was nothing, commanding Celine and the squad to hold the line while she personally dismantled him. Over in the trenches, Rangus, still totally starless, was fighting for his life, desperately blocking a brutal barrage from his attacker. His opponent laughed in his face, aggressively taunting him to just quit and hand over the loot. Rangus froze up, completely drowning in second thoughts. That is until a massive flashback hit him, a core memory of a deep talk he had with Zeke. Back then, Rangus had desperately asked Zeke if a weakling like him could ever actually bridge the massive power gap against superior fighters. He poured his heart out about being starless, terrified that facing heavy hitters would make him a massive liability to the squad. Zeke's response hit him like a truck. Then you should just give up, Zeke had stated coldly. He broke it down: if an enemy is in a totally different league, like a 3 or 4-star beast, folding is literally your only survival option. Because a 0-star scrub has 0% chance, but Zeke flipped the script, dropping a crucial loophole. If Rangus ever squared up against a 1, when Rangus frantically asked for the cheat code, Zeke kept it insanely simple. It is not rocket science. You literally just have to punish their mistakes. Punish, Rangus had muttered, completely lost. Exactly, Zeke confirmed. If you can spot a crack in your enemy's armor and strike, you can drop them, even if they are rocking 2 stars. But when Rangus pressed him on how to actually find that golden window, Zeke's answer was painfully raw. Tank it. Just survive the beating until they slip up. Rangus was super skeptical, but Zeke kept preaching. There is literally no magic trick. You cannot force a god-tier opening against someone buffed with better stats. Your only play is to weather the storm until they get sloppy. And if you cannot even handle that, then taking down a superior opponent is pure delusion. Zeke added a reality check. If your opponent is a freak of nature like Lika, you will get deleted in seconds. But against some basic 2-star NPC, you can definitely hold your ground. He drilled it into Rangus that blind confidence was key, blessing him with one final golden rule. Stop overthinking. Forget about forcing a play or sweating the power gap. Just wait them out, and the split second they mess up, bury your spear straight through them. Snapped back to reality, Rangus tightened his grip, Zeke's legendary advice playing on loop in his head. Knowing he was outmatched, he committed to the grind, eating every single strike while hunting for that perfect opening. The senior started raging, getting completely tilted as Rangus stuck. Just drop dead already, he screamed violently, throwing his entire body into a chaotic, heavy swing. But right there, time froze. Rangus spotted the exact window Zeke promised. Without hesitation, he channeled every ounce of his power and drove his spear brutally into his opponent's torso. The senior hacked up. Leica instantly caught sight of that glowing one-star insignia, newly stamped upon him. Absolutely stunned, but incredibly hyped that Rangus had actually managed to fold his opponent. Meanwhile, the captain of the seniors was completely losing his mind, unable to wrap his head around why Leica's presence felt so suffocatingly heavy, especially since they were technically both sitting at that 2-star tier. But Leica knew exactly why. Ever since she completely mastered that brutal axe-wielding style Zik had pushed her to learn, she figured out how to funnel a massive amount of raw, explosive energy straight into her heavy blade, totally shattering the power scaling between them. Staring him down, she coldly warned the guy that picking a fight with her squad was the absolute worst mistake of his life. Igniting fierce golden electricity all the way down her steel, she yelled, "This ends right here!" Her weapon slammed down with a blinding flash, instantly knocking the rival captain. Once the dust settled and the threat was totally neutralized, Leica sprinted back to her squad to check if everyone made it out in one piece. The moment everyone gave the green light, the whole crew completely lost it, cheering over their Celine and Raymond practically tackled Rangus, hyping him up for officially breaking through to the 1-star stage, and Rangus just beamed right back at them, flashing a massive grateful grin. Leitza watched her squad with this deep sense of pride swelling up. As it finally hit her, every single person on her team had officially unlocked their very first stars. Brimming with confidence, she hyped them up, promising that the upcoming fights were going to be an absolute breeze. But then her gaze drifted off into the distance, and she couldn't help but wonder out loud, just how is Zik holding up out there? Cut to somewhere deep inside the treacherous Poison Dragon Mountain, where a completely panicked senior was literally sprinting for his life. Sobbing uncontrollably, he just kept chanting, "Please stay away, Zik. Just stay away." Shivering from pure terror, he spat out curses between his ragged breaths, completely traumatized as he asked himself what kind of absolute demon that freshman Zik actually was. Hey, if you love this insane chapter and need to see the fallout, you already know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss out on the next drop of this legendary saga.